Perception is a gamble, and cognition is a story. What does this cryptic statement actually mean? Only that things are not as they seem, that our senses deceive and our minds distort, creating a convenient but ultimately inaccurate picture of reality, accompanied by a cute story about the way things are and ought to be, a story shaped by our past and embodied by us in the present moment. At least, that's what I suggested at the end of last episode, and today I'd like to expand on it a little bit more. But before I do, I have a feeling that some of you might be feeling a wee bit defensive. And no wonder. Who am I to claim that your most cherished beliefs and opinions are nothing more than a story? Doesn't that imply that there's some kind of fabrication? Some kind of fiction? How dare I make such a statement? First off, when I say that cognition is a story, I'm going way beyond personal beliefs and opinions. Mathematics and science, philosophy and history, biology and physics. These are all just stories we tell each other in order to make sense of this world that we live in and the universe around us. Yes, these stories differ greatly in style and purpose, but at some level they're all just our attempts to describe meaningful patterns in ourselves and in our environment. Whether expressed through numbers and letters, concepts and metaphors, all of human knowledge and all of human understanding is one big fascinating story. Again, don't think I'm trying to trivialize any of this. To the contrary, I'm trying to elevate it, cast it in a new light, and reveal the immense power that stories have in the sphere of human affairs. The power to alter the course of history, liberate the masses, and raise human consciousness to new levels. Conversely, these stories also have the power to enslave us, keep us distracted, and make us suffer to no end. So if you don't like the term story, feel free to use a different one. In fact, feel free to use any term you like. It makes absolutely no difference as far as I'm concerned. The important thing is that you acknowledge this story's existence, and more importantly, the impact it has on your life. The ability to share information symbolically, using images and sounds to represent aspects of reality, is one of humankind's greatest gifts, and one of the features that distinguishes us from the rest of our relatives on the tree of life. As author Terry Pratchett notes, plenty of creatures are intelligent, but only one tells stories. And yes, my friends, the stories we tell each other have real-life consequences. The world as we know it today was shaped and influenced by the myths, fables, and heroic epics of yesterday. And while many of these stories have lost their grip on us now, there are new ones constantly rising up to take their place and competing for our attention in the crowded marketplace of ideas. What we tend to overlook amidst all this noise is the story we tell ourselves about the way things are and ought to be. We tend to overlook it because of all the stories we encounter, it's the most feasible, the most familiar, the most comfortable. It's kind of like your favorite spot on the couch. When you plop down and you sit there for a few minutes, it gets kind of hard to tell where the couch ends and where your body begins. That's how comfortable you are. Likewise, it's hard to tell where our story ends and reality begins. And so in time, we come to regard our story as reality. Case in point, when we encounter new ideas, beliefs, or opinions, we tend to weigh their merit by comparing them to our own. We often do this unconsciously, instinctively, as if somehow our beliefs are the ultimate measuring stick of truth and goodness. Well, okay, listen, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth here. Maybe you're not like this at all. Maybe what I'm actually describing is how I operate. For most of my life, I failed to acknowledge my story, and in doing so, bought into it wholesale. Whenever I encountered a story that failed to align with my own, that failed to support, validate, or corroborate what I believed, I dismissed it because, well, duh, obviously it's wrong. It wasn't until I embarked on the path of spiritual exploration that I fully became aware of my story, and more importantly, began to study it closely. What I learned is that my story influences me at all times. How I approach and interact with the world, whether my life has meaning or not, whether my days are filled with joy or depression, bliss or anger. In fact, the very quality of my experience depends on my story and the degree to which I believe it to be true. Remember the anecdote I told you back in episode 1 about the crawl space and the jackhammer and the urge to get the fuck out? Turns out I was telling myself a bit of a story at this point. I was telling myself the demolition work is shit work that is beneath me, work that is soul-crushing and boring and depressing. And guess what? I believed this story so strongly that I had a genuine existential crisis. But then, amidst the despair, something changed. For a moment, I stopped believing the story and instead, I started asking questions. A few serious moments of contemplation was all I needed, my friends. I soon realized that there was nothing intrinsically bad about demolition work, nothing that distinguished it from other comparable lines of work. And with that, the entire story came undone. My depression lifted, and I was cured. Now, it's not to say that the crawl space immediately transformed into a paradise. I wasn't exactly overjoyed to be there, but the urge to run away was gone, replaced instead by a grim sense of satisfaction. And then a few days later, I was chatting with my good friend Brian, and I was telling him about the crawl space and some of the realizations that emerged from it, and he just started to laugh. He said, "Ollie, do you want to know my trick? Next time you're in one of these situations, doing some kind of job that is just grueling and backbreaking, keep telling yourself, I'm getting paid to work out." So I gave that a shot. I adopted it as my mantra, and lo and behold, it worked. Like a hot damn. Now I wasn't just powering through and tolerating manual labor. I was actually enjoying it. I was like, yeah, baby, yeah, getting paid to work out. Oh! So you see, the story isn't written in stone. You can amend it, adding and removing elements as needed. But first, you have to see the story for what it truly is, and that's no simple proposition. You can't exactly just pick it up and flip through the pages like you would a normal book. In order to learn your story in depth, you'll have to journey within, which is what spiritual exploration is all about. The process of inquiry that I've been outlining with you over the course of the last few weeks is meant to unearth your story and its underlying premises, by which I mean the assumptions, expectations, motives, desires, and definitions that drive your life from the back seat. In a lot of ways, spiritual exploration is like a high school book report, only instead of Animal Farm and Lord of the Flies, the book you're trying to study is your entire worldview. And if you're anything like me, this book report might make you uncomfortable at times. I know that when I started flipping through the pages of my story a few short years ago, I was shocked. I didn't get very far before saying, who the fuck wrote this? Page after page, I kept seeing other people's words, other people's plots, other people's characters, and I began to wonder, how had I acquired this bizarre and sordid tale? How did I go on believing it for so long and so firmly? These are just a few of the questions that guided me early on in my exploration, and next episode I would like to share some of my findings with you. So tune in, and I will try to explain as best as I can how we come to acquire the beliefs that shape and dictate our lives. Until then, live well, my friends.